frontier. Trust you had a great weekend. I certainly had a busy one. Hannah, who's the youngest in our family, had all kinds of social engagements, which ended up in the afternoon on Sunday in Karura Forest. And at first we couldn't even work out where the party was, but then it was a great party. And we had a good time in the forest, I must admit. It was a pleasure speaking with Bonnie of CNBC Africa, as it always is. It's very erudite. Mindspeak returns this weekend at the Sankara Hotel. I hope you can make it. Pradeep Panrana is the guest. Pradeep, great story. IPO'd his company, Arm Cement, on the same day of the Sabah Sabah riots in the 1990s. Indeed, it's come an enormous way. Home Thoughts ISIL blows up the Arch of Triumph in Syria's Palmyra. Of course, that took me to I met a traveller from an antique land who said too fast, and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that it sculptor well those passions red which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away, and it's just appalling, isn't it? It's extraordinary flowering of human culture. Kenyan facts: celebrations to mark the end of World War II on the streets of Nairobi in 1945. It does produce some interesting photographs, and I do enjoy them. Dennis Healy passed away, and he was a sort of totemic political figure, particularly in my time, because of course I went to the United Kingdom in 1978, and Healy was always a very big player on the scene. World events do not occur by accident. They are made to happen, whether it is to do with national issues or commerce, and most of them are staged and managed by those who hold the purse strings. My piece over the weekend is about Putin, and I called him a geopolitical GrandMaster. It's been quite a week, starting with the big set-piece occasion at the United Nations General Assembly. There are few occasions, if any, where any and every world leader gets an opportunity to speak uninterrupted to the world. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to experiment with avant-garde theatre, and this time included a 44-second silent interlude in his delivery, which is best described as quite surreal. President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe quite plaintively announced, "We're not gays." However, the big set piece was surely Russia's Vladimir Putin, who spent less than 24 hours in New York during this visit. Putin has always been considered a grandmaster of geopolitics, but of late has been placed under tremendous pressure by the oil warfare specialist, President Obama of the US. The wrestling of the oil price from above $100 to below $50 a barrel was always intended to wither Russia's power and send it into a tailspin. What remains interesting is how what is perceived as external pressure can actually create a situation where the people rally behind their leaders. Putin's popularity held rock steady throughout this period as the stock market and the Russian ruble crashed. The resilience around his domestic popularity seemingly confounds many. Putin has been on the back foot big time. The body language between President Obama and Vladimir Putin is also another avenue worthy of study. Obama has a barely concealed, evidently visceral dislike of Putin. You see this in the frozen handshakes and a number of facial gestures and interactions. Let us return to Ungar, where Putin set out his stall, and I quote, "I cannot help asking those who have caused the situation, do you realize now what you've done?" With hundreds of thousands of refugees entering Europe, his question was a sharp one. Within 24 hours of delivering that speech, Russia instructed that the US should vacate Syrian airspace. This message was not delivered to Ashton Carter by his Russian counterpart Shoigu. It was delivered to the US embassy in Baghdad. And pretty soon after that message was delivered, Russia began its intervention on the side of President Assad of Syria. You could hear the squealing start immediately from Ankara to Riyadh, from the GCC to Washington. All these capitals have assets on the ground in Syria, and what is clear is that Russia is not making a distinction between IS or the moderate opposition fighting Assad, which really means our terrorists. Lavrov said if it looks like a terrorist, if it acts like a terrorist, if it walks like a terrorist, if it fights like a terrorist, it's a terrorist, right? Putin fancies himself the flycatcher in Syria, the fly trap. The speed of execution confirms that Russia is once again a geopolitical actor that will have to be considered. It's a breathtaking rebound. President Obama is now probably considering how he can wrestle the oil price to $20 a barrel. I'll put up a photograph of Vladimir Putin arriving at the Elysee on Friday, and also go back to that question he says, I cannot help asking those who have caused the situation, do you realize now what you've done? Since 2011, this is from The Independent, Patrick Coburn. Since 2011, the departure from power of President Assad has been prescribed as a quick way to bring an end to the conflict, although there is no reason to believe this. From an early stage in the Syrian crisis, intelligence reports discounted or derided claims that moderate or secular forces were leading the opposition. In a moment of frankness in 2014, Vice President Joe Biden gave a succinct account of what the administration really thought about what was happening in Syria. He said that Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the UAE were so determined to take down Assad and essentially have a proxy Sunni-Shia war. They financed and armed anybody who would fight against Assad, except that the people who were being supplied were al-Nusra and al-Qaeda, and the extremist elements coming from other parts of the world. He wasn't wrong. And then I saw another article where it said Putin is undoing years of work by rolling up proxy units, and I think he is. Have a look at this other photograph at the Elysee summit on the subject of Ukraine. You can see Putin, you can see Merkel, you can see Hollande, and you can see Poroshenko. Live leak. Putin's blitz leaves Washington rankled and confused. What was interesting is this. Look at the story. On Monday, President Putin delivered a blistering critique of US foreign policy to the UN General Assembly. On Tuesday, Obama shoved a knife in Putin's back. This is from Reuters. France will discuss with its partners in the coming days a proposal by Turkey and members of the Syrian opposition for a no-fly zone in northern Syria. This was François Hollande. Laurent Fabius in the coming days will look at what the demarcation would be, how this zone could be secured, and what our partners think. Saying, but that's beside the point. The real reason the no-fly zone issue has resurfaced is because it was one of the concessions Obama made to Turkish President Erdogan for the use of the Incirlik airbase. Washington kept the terms of that deal secret, but Hollande has let the cat out of the bag, saying it suggests there was a quid pro quo for the use of Incirlik and that Turkey's demands were accepted. Why is that important? Turkey had 3 demands: safe zone in North Syria, which means that Turkey would basically annex a good portion of Syrian sovereign territory, a no-fly zone, which would allow either Turkish troops, US Special Forces or US-backed jihadis to conduct military operations with the support of US air cover, a commitment from the US that it will help Turkey remove Assad. Saying, did Obama agree to all of these demands before Erdogan agreed to let the US Air Force use Incirlik? Yes, at least I think he did. And saying that's why the normally cautious Putin decided to deploy his warplanes, troops and weaponry so soon after the Incirlik deal was signed. He could see the handwriting on the wall. Either act fast and turn the tide, or accept the fact that the US and Turkey were going to topple Assad sometime after Turkey's snap elections on November the 1st. That was his timeline for action. Seems plausible, doesn't it? On Wednesday, just 2 days after Putin announced the UN General Assembly we can no longer tolerate the current state of affairs in the world, ordered the bombing of targets in Homs. Putin's air squadrons are unleashing holy hell on the sociopaths, the head choppers, and other assorted vipers. I'll put up another photograph of him and then leave you with that remark. He said, we can no longer tolerate the current state of affairs in the world. And that was the piece I wrote about it being so arrhythmic. Refugees flying everywhere. I mean, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? I used to have some fairly right-wing friends, as you do, and I'd often ask them, there would always be this fear of swarms of refugees just invading. And occasionally, when you look at the TV, it looks like that. And I wonder, I haven't done any analysis on the right-wing vote in Europe recently. I'm going to have a look at it. Anyway, let's move on. Zero Hedge World Bank cuts China 2015 GDP forecast to 6.9% from 7.1. As I've said, I think it's about 3.5. And I wrote a piece when I was saying, the problem's that no one believes the data now. This moment when the market stops suspending its disbelief is seriously a dangerous one for policymakers. Eric Scott Hunsaid on Friday tweeted a lovely photograph of currency movements around the non-farm payroll number. Let me put that up. That number was softer than the market expected. The euro is trading at 112.53. Dollar index is around 95.70. Dollar yen back above 120, 120.16. Swissy 0.9703. The pound last trading at 152.31. Aussie is also stronger, 0.7089. Indian rupee 65.315. South African won 11.7214. Real 393.31. Egyptian pound 781.80, and the rand 13.71. So you've seen a little bit of an improvement, sell-off in the dollar after that number. Last month, and this is what's caused the weakness in the dollar, the Fed forecast the tightening cycle will end with the Fed funds rate of 3.5%. Treasuries now are indicating a peak of 1.75% for almost 5 years. Let me put up a chart of the dollar that Bloomberg tweeted. Euro dollar, let me put up a 3-month chart of that. We could get back up to 114.50, which is where we found resistance from the ECB in particular. Commodity markets, gold last trading at around the 1136 level, 1135, 1150 to 1155 is key resistance for gold. But we might get a year-end rally in these commodity markets and commodities, so we've got to be wary of that. Crude oil also slightly better, $45.82, and trades a little bit better than it has previously. Frontier investors adopt wait and see. This is the FT. $965 million of net outflows from Frontier funds so far this year. A net $5.3 billion has flowed in since January 2013. That's Morningstar. Mugabe's oldest allies fear ousting him could see them sidelined. Given the level of factionalism in ZANU-PF, there is no strong force enough to oust him. If he doesn't die in office and he steps down beforehand, he will try to control the process as much as possible and will probably succeed. Zimbabwe faces its worst economic crises since its virtual collapse in 2008, when inflation soared to 500 billion%, prompting the government to abandon its currency in favour of the use of foreign exchange, including the dollar, in early 2009. City residents now subjected to power cuts between 4 a.m. and 10 p.m. on an almost daily basis. We're being taken to a very low point, Harare-based economist John Robertson. No one seems able to announce policies that may provide at least partial relief for fear of being contradicted by the president. The Economist tweeted Mugabe's record of mismanaging Zimbabwe in one chart. It's shocking, it really is. And he was a great freedom fighter, but he's been a disaster at the helm of Zimbabwe. You know, you've got to be a bit Sun Tzu about these things. Swallow your pride and deal with the world as you find it. You can't just keep fighting it. CCM, this is JP Magufuli, the election gets closer in Tanzania. Interesting piece about the CFA currency, having only fallen 7% against the dollar this year, compared with 13% for the cedi, 24% for the kwanza, and 47% in the kwacha, Zambia kwacha. However, a lot of people are saying that it is a straitjacket. Angola is considering issuing domestic market treasury bonds in foreign currencies. You'll remember they postponed their Eurobond. Julius Malema says the EFF will rule South Africa in 2019. South African all shares up 2.38% year to date. Dollar rand, let me put up a 6-month chart, beginning to sense it's quite twin-sided. It might rally into year end. Nigeria's former oil minister Dizani Alison Madueke was arrested in London on Friday, a source from Nigeria's presidency circle and another with links to her family said. And I talked about this on the 21st of September when I said, over in Nigeria, President Buhari has made the calculation that he needs to drain the trough. He is Mr. Forensic Audit. If he plugs the various gaps, he's going to find $20 billion a year easily. Nigerian all share down 11.74% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 11.55% year to date. Have a listen to this podcast from Rafael Moraes, who's this Angolan journalist speaking on corruption in Angola for Freedom Week. Very interesting. I came across some photographs in The Guardian, the wild side, Africa on safari. Then we put one up, roaming giraffes, taken from the Mara. Interesting piece in the FT by Katrina Manson. East Africa set to grow despite endemic problems. In the past year, more than $200 million has been wiped off the value of one of Kenya's top manufacturing businesses, equivalent to nearly half its market capitalization. Pradeep Panrana sees it as part of a wider malaise. It's not a good time to be a manufacturer in East Africa. Overheads are huge, borrowing is expensive, devaluation has wiped out any gains. It is not only the region's small manufacturing sector that has suffered. The top 20 blue chips on the Nairobi Stock Exchange are down about 20% as a whole this year. Interesting piece. The drivers of growth in East Africa are diverse. This is Gabriel Negatu. That's true, but it has slowed down. David Cohen, if you believe in an African middle class, then a lower oil price would translate into greater consumption. But it doesn't seem to have happened. First, because there's kind of a mythical middle class, and second, because as a result of currency weakness, domestic petrol prices increased again. I couldn't agree more. Coming to Kenya, Njogu Damburi tweeted me, Kenya T-bills 91 day at 20.637%, 182 days at 20.331%, and 364 days at 20.695%. This is a highly problematic situation. We really need those rates to start coming down. Interesting piece in The Economist. Kenya find the money in the mystery of Nairobi's property boom. Look, there are not enough mortgages to create a crash. That's the first point. There are very few. But there is a ton of extras space in the commercial sector. Kenya shilling 103.30. There you go. So my call of a turnaround was a good one. Nairobi all share fell heavily on Friday, 1.71%. It's now down 12.11% year to date. NSE 20 is down 19.62% year to date. Elkanah Jacob tweeted, police guarding Gulf African Bank Bondeni Mombasa, which is my hometown, shot dead, loaded G3 stolen. But the photograph was a really good one. And okay, so the shilling was at 103.30. Central bank is obviously burning shilling short positions via an ultra high interest rate regime. That's putting pressure on the equity market. You know, we're in a situation where there's good value maybe in the market. It'll be interesting to see where support comes in. The NSE 20, for example, is about just 29 points above its 2015 low. We don't want it to close on the low. That would be a bearish signal. Once again, thank you for stopping by.